Welcome to the full council meeting of the 17th of October. We're starting half an hour earlier this evening because we have a special guest with us this evening who will be giving us a talk on unitary authorities and devolved powers in the direction of town and parish councils. So we're looking forward to hearing what Councillor Heather Smith has to say on that subject. I'll begin with apologies for absence.
I've had apologies from Councillor N. Oakes, Councillor S. Oakes, Councillor Peel and Councillor Glenn.
Thank you. Do we accept the apologies?
Of course.
From those? We do. Thank you. Declarations of interest. To receive and consider any declarations of interest from members and officers under Section 50 of the Local Government Act 2000, our Standing Order 35. This requirement applies only in respect of matters which are to be considered by the Council at this meeting. Item 100.01, to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests. Anybody? No. To declare any other interests.
I suppose, after we've got the neighbourhood plan on
We
here,
all have an interest in it.
I had better declare an interest as being a member of the Glapthorne Neighbourhood Plan Group as well.
Thank you. And I shall mention, as I always do, that I'm a resident of Glapthorne, but I am not on either their parish council or their neighbourhood plan working group. But just so everybody's aware of that fact. Any other interests?
Do we have to mention that we're all residents of Almond if we are doing it?
I think the clerk will note that everybody else is a resident.
You have done sometimes, but sometimes you haven't. I know it was something that Sian did say that you perhaps ought to, but it's obviously up to you.
The alternative is to look at the next item, which is a request for dispensation, and use that every time.
The next item, as Councillor Chappell has already said, is to consider any requests for dispensation. No. To report any gifts or hospitality accepted over the value of £50. Anybody? No. And to report any inappropriate gifts or hospitality offered.
Definitely.
Fine. We move on then to item 101, minutes of the previous meetings. 101.01, proposition to approve and sign the minutes of the full council meeting held on the 19th of September 2017 as an accurate record, and this is our Standing Order 10C. You've got the minutes in your pack, those of you that were present.
I thought I'd just refresh my memory. You're now on page 6, I think.
Do I have proposed Councillor Chesser, seconded Councillor Chappell? Those in favour? All those who were present at the time and are present tonight have indicated acceptance. And the next proposition is to approve and sign the minutes of the Neighbourhood Plan full council meeting held on the 3rd of October 2017 as an accurate record. Again, Standing Order 10C applies.
Yes, I'll propose.
Proposer, Councillor Fuller. Seconder, Councillor Humphreys.
And you want to approve?
Those in favour? That's all in favour. Thank you. Right, that's got those items out of the way. Now, item 102, I would like to introduce Councillor Heather Smith, leader of Northamptonshire County Council, and of course our County Councillor for Oundle.
Yeah,
The floor is yours, Heather.
thank you. Well, the reason why I'm here tonight follows a meeting several months ago organised by Northamptonshire Association of Local Councils, and your mayor was present at that meeting. And one of the things that came up was people who were present were asked, you know, how many parishes, town councils, etc., really understood what unitary governance meant. And so I agreed that I would come along and talk to you about it. So it's really an information and to help you to understand what happens throughout the country. Now in Northamptonshire we have parish and town councils, we have district and borough councils, and we have a county council. So we have a three-tier system. In places like Peterborough, you have one unitary council, the city of Peterborough, and there will be, in some of the outlying areas that are covered by Peterborough, you'll have parish councils. I'm not aware that there is a Peterborough Town Council. I don't think that's ever happened. So they just have those two tiers of local government. In other areas, over the past few years, there has been some changes. And if you look at Bedfordshire, Bedfordshire was split into 3 unitaries several years ago. 3 quite small unitaries, that's Luton, Central Beds, and Bedford itself. But they also have parish and town councils too. So again, they're 2-tier. A few years ago, when the Labour government was in control, they asked local councils to volunteer to go unitary. And at that time, Northamptonshire got into some discussions that ended up in an almighty row and fallout. So Northamptonshire never actually changed position, but some parts of the country did at the time. Wiltshire was one of them, where they went unitary. And the way they went unitary was they set up local boards as well, so that you kept the local feel, so that the big services are all controlled from the centre, but they have these local boards that involve the local elected unitary councillors and also the town councils for that area. It's sort of broken up into compartments. Now, before the general election, there were discussions going on in Northamptonshire about what we should do, and I think the district councils, all of them bar one as far as I know, commissioned a report, and I don't know whether that report has ever actually been finalised or not. The county council wasn't part of that. And there were discussions over whether 1 unitary, 2 unitaries, 3 unitaries would be right for Northamptonshire. I can honestly say there was never any agreement over what model might be preferable for Northamptonshire. Even within the district and borough councils, there was no agreement. Northampton felt they should be a unitary on their own. Wellingborough didn't want to change anything. Kettering thought there should be a North Northamptonshire unitary, and then have Daventry, Northampton and South Northants as a West Northampton unitary. But not everybody agreed with that, so there wasn't even a 2 option on the table. I felt, in the interests of trying to save public money, that we should go for one unitary. So anyway, war broke out again, I think that's probably fair to say. And then the general election this year happened, with the government taking control with a very small majority, well, practically no majority at all. And it was made clear that unless everybody all agreed, the government wouldn't touch it. So I just thought, okay, forget it, you know, it's not going to go anywhere. But then yesterday I was down in London with Sajid Javid and the leader of Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, who had submitted formal bids. And he actually said, and that wasn't why we were down there, it was nothing to do with that at all, but he actually said that he was going to make a decision later this year on Dorset, and then Buckinghamshire, and then Oxfordshire. And we all looked at each other and thought, because there isn't agreement, certainly, I don't know about Dorset, but certainly within Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire, you know, there's war going on there, as there always seems to be when you start discussing it. And then he looked at me and he said, and then you got Northamptonshire afterwards, and I thought, no you haven't, because we haven't done anything. But I came away thinking, is the door shut on it or not? So as it stands, I really don't know. I await with interest to see what decision he actually makes, if he makes any decision at all. Because unless all the MPs support whatever model he's settling on, and in Buckinghamshire, for example, there is a single unitary bid from the county council, and I think there's a 2 unitary bid from the district councils. So he's got 2 conflicting bids to look at to make a decision on. So I'll sit back, fold my arms and just see what happens there. So although I would have said it's all completely dead, I really don't know anymore. So that's the situation on it. And if any of you want to ask me any questions on it, I'm only too happy to try and answer. But otherwise, I'll just keep you informed if anything changes. But as it stands, I don't know what the report that's been commissioned by the districts and borough councils actually says. And I don't know whether everybody there is just forgetting it or not. But at the moment, I'm not doing anything until I get more of a clear steer on whether it's worth the effort of reopening it, or we've got enough to deal with at the moment without that as well. While I'm here, I will just briefly mention the announcement that was made yesterday, which is going out for public consultation on a number of budget reductions. The County Council has been heading towards only providing social care and not much else ever since 2010. And a huge amount of money has already been taken out, and it's reached the point now where it's services that directly affect individuals that are now being looked at. The paper that was announced yesterday is to go out for consultation. That consultation hasn't yet been approved by Cabinet. That's due to go before Cabinet on Thursday. And the reason why it's come out now, not at the normal time of December, is that the proposals that are in there require extensive consultation. It affects staff, so you have to go through, you know, potential redundancy situation, and it just gives more time as well. Some of the things that are in there would require changes in policy, so to be able to do any changes and get any savings in time for 1st of April next year, this is why it's come out now. So if I could just briefly mention, if you can give me the time, about Oundle Library.
Please.
I really don't want it to close. And what has happened in other parts of the country is they've gone down, the county councils have gone down just to a core group of large libraries, and the other libraries have become community libraries. I really genuinely hope that happens, and some parishes are already indicating to us, we'd like to look at it with you. So there's plenty of time to get into detailed discussions if the town council has any appetite for it at all. What I can say is that if there is a library to remain in Amble as a community library, then the county council would provide the book service.
Right.
So the book service that happens now, so that you've got a constant change of books, would still carry on. But it's something for you to think about. You know, now the consultation is about to start, and it formally starts after Thursday if we approve it, and I can't see that we won't. It's something that you can consider. Now, whether you'd want the library to be in this building rather than in a separate building to keep the cost down, I don't know. That's something that there's all sorts of details that could be discussed. But we're at a very early stage now. It isn't definite that Amble would be one of the ones to close, and a lot depends on a number of the other communities coming forward and what they want to do. It's a very sad state of affairs. I really don't want that to happen. I don't want a lot of the things that are announced to happen, but we have no choice. And it's really sad.
If I can just ask a question on the subject of the libraries, the paper that's been produced shows that you're looking at 3 options.
Yeah.
2 of those 3 options would retain Amble Library, but the third one would go down to a core of, I think, 8 large libraries within Northamptonshire, and Amble would then not exist as a county library. So what I'm sure we haven't had a chance to take a vote on it at all. We can't vote on it tonight because it's not been agended.
No, and it's something you want to know a lot more about before you get to the situation of having a vote on it anyway.
I think I speak for all the councillors that we would urge to try and keep the library. One of the 2 options that keeps Amble Library going, I think we would all be in agreement with that. Am I?
Yep.
Do I have
Absolutely.
support
See,
on that?
Buckinghamshire have gone down to 4, and they've been running community. They went down to 4 and have had community libraries operating for several years. And I talked to the leader there about it, and I said, "How does it work? Have people lost interest? Has it then meant that subsequently the library's still closed?" And he said, "No, they're thriving." So. Anyway, but
Can I ask a question? Would the county retain ownership of the properties? How would that work?
that would be down for discussion. You know, if
I mean, not thinking of selling them all off to get them and building on the sites, for instance.
with all of the libraries, some are owned by us, some are leased by us. It's different throughout the county. I'm pretty sure we own that one.
Yeah, I think we do.
But, you know, that we haven't reached anywhere near that.
Questions people will ask.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I mean, if you took on the library, that would be increased running costs.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that really needs a lot of serious thought.
It does, yes. It's an item that we'd have to agenda. Councillor Chappell.
Obviously, it's a bit difficult to even form a view without doing the necessary due diligence about what it might all cost. So at what point is the county council likely to be able to give councils that sort of information?
Anybody who shows an interest, I've made sure that officers come out to talk to you about it in detail.
Okay.
So it's just, we're at a very, very early stage at the moment. There's a number of stages to go through before any final decisions are made, and the final decisions won't be made until about February next year.
Right.
So at the moment it's just going out to consultation and then seeing what the responses are from everybody. And I can understand your automatic response would be, we'd rather it stayed open as it is. And at the end of the day, we've got a target amount that we need to take out of library services, and a lot depends on, you know, the response from everybody. So, you know, it's the consultation is really important for lots of people to make comments. Yeah.
Just, I mean, having heard you say that it's something's going to happen, isn't it? Something will happen to the library.
Some of the libraries.
Because of the cost-cutting
Yes. something has to happen. We looked at this a few years ago, and we've tried to make them more self-sustaining, tried to encourage people when they come in to make a donation or a contribution, and you know, it's still a significant
So there's
cost.
a degree of inevitability about this process that we
Of
have to
some
be,
libraries.
that we have to be aware of.
Yes, yeah, whether I like it or not, you know, because the libraries do far more than just books.
Councillor
The problem for us, and I suspect everybody else, is simply that we've just started our budgeting process.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to have finished our budgeting process by January. And this may or may not have considerable implications for our budgeting process, and we don't have a single bit of data to go off. And it appears that the County Council is determined to resolve this issue from its point of view in time for the next financial year starting in April. And I really find that very difficult, because it really doesn't give local communities adequate time. And I would ask if there is any way in which the County Council can avoid rushing into this very major decision. It should do so, and it should try and make that decision not in this coming financial year, but in the one after.
Absolutely.
I understand exactly what you're saying, but that money would have to come from somewhere else. That's what we're up against, and the 9 million that was announced this week is less than a third of the total amount we've got to find for 18-19. So, you know, we really are up against the wall. But this is partly why we've gone out earlier than we would normally. Normally it wouldn't have got announced until December, which is far too late for everybody.
Yes.
But I think if there was an expression of serious interest from a council, then I don't see why there couldn't be some negotiation over it.
I think I can say on behalf of the council here tonight, as I say, we won't vote on it until the next full council,
Yeah.
but I think I can say for all the councillors here that if there is any suggestion of Oundle Library being at risk, we would certainly like to speak to your officers from the library service and talk to them as soon as possible about all
To get
aspects
more
of
of
it.
an idea of what
Yeah.
it's about.
Everything to do with the running of it, and to give us an idea of what sort of sums we need to put into our budgets. We need to come up with a precept figure for district council by January at the latest, in order that it goes out with the rates letters in March. So we've got that deadline on us. But between now and then, as soon as you've got a decision from Thursday, we would
Yeah.
like to...
I think it's largely run by volunteers now. I think there is only one employed member of staff
Yes,
there. But that building itself will have overheads.
yes.
Exactly.
So, and I don't know what they are. It was just coincidence that we pre-arranged for me to come tonight when the announcement came out yesterday. But I mean, if I can go back and just say you just want to explore it a bit further,
That's it.
without saying, you know, you really are interested in taking it on or not, then I'm very happy to do that and ask them to contact your town clerk
Yes,
to arrange a time to come out.
yes.
Yeah. I think it's a sad day myself. No.
The other things that were in statements today, one of them was transport, and I think a lot of people are concerned about what might happen to local bus services.
Yeah, it's only the ones that the county council subsidise. So any of the services that run through here that are commercially run by Stagecoach or whoever, they will have no impact on them at all.
Right,
The ones it would affect is the County Connect Call Connect.
right.
And with that, you know, some of those services are very well used. Other ones are not, and it's those that are not well used where you start to work out what the cost per passenger per journey is. And if you're not careful, you're suddenly talking about £20 subsidy per person. And, you know, it's those that would be the most vulnerable. I hope that it doesn't all go, because, you know, for me that was always a good solution when we reduced the bus subsidies a few years ago. I think it was 2011, and I'd hate to see it go. But again, you know, yes, but
Some of the services are to some extent subsidised, which is why we have a problem with things like wanting the X4 to go to the station. It doesn't, because it doesn't have a subsidy, but some other buses of the commercials, I believe, do have a subsidy.
very few.
And yet,
Very few.
I believe our call collect service is part funded by the county council here. It's being managed by Lincolnshire County
Yes, it is.
Council. And I believe, I don't know whether those sponsorships are still going on, those subsidies from the likes of Waitrose were subsidising some of those services, at least for a number of years. That might have expired now.
Yeah, that often happens with new housing developments or with, you know, new supermarkets, and your district councils will know more about that than me, that you very often got a legal agreement in there that there is some bus provision as a result of the development that's taken place. I wasn't aware that Waitrose were subsidising the Call Connect service. Maybe they are, I really don't know.
They certainly were, whether
Yeah.
they still are,
Yeah,
I don't know, but they certainly were at the beginning.
yeah.
And the manager of the Waitrose and I monitored the service for a while, because certainly one of the areas he was subsidising was the one which has now stopped, to bring people from Stanford to Oundle on a Thursday for the market.
Yeah.
And he was also subsidising one of the other services, and it may well have been the one in the opposite direction on a Friday, which goes from Oundle to Stanford.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
he
the
was...
co-op have been laid on a bus themselves that goes around the villages, and that's nothing to do with the county council.
Yeah.
That's entirely, you know, for them.
Mm.
So, you know, there may be other solutions emerge as a result of the consultations, but again,
And the public are going to ask the question, does this affect bus passes? They're a national...
yeah, no, it doesn't. That is a national scheme. It does cost the county council a lot of money, because, you know, people can go all over the country with them, and it's where they use the bus within, like, Northamptonshire, that we then have to cover the cost. So that isn't anything that we've got any real control over. There was a government grant that came with it, but it was never enough to cover the cost of it.
Right.
The only thing that's sort of buzzing around in my mind is that all of the libraries, they do provide bus passes.
Yes.
People can go in there. Now, when it was run by the district council before, I think there were just a couple of places in East Northants where you could go. And of course, once it was taken over by the county and we put it in all the libraries, it gave much more choice to people.
Yes.
So it's, you know, that's another thing that needs sorting out. What will we do about that?
Mm.
So there's all sorts of implications to a lot of it that's still got to be resolved.
Yes. And I think the third statement that was made today concerned roads and road repairs.
Yeah, that's more, there's, for 1 year, they would reduce the amount of weed killing. There are a few things that were in there. It wasn't road repairs as such. I think it's probably some line marking,
Right.
some gully cleaning, and you know, just some of the more minor stuff. The more significant one that's in it, and it's not for this winter, it would be for the next winter, was to reduce the number of roads that are gritted if we have a bad winter. The
Right.
main routes would always be done, but we've always done more than the national average by
Right.
trying to ensure that every village had an exit route. And I said when that went in, I said, well, that's it, when the weather's bad, you won't see me, I shall work from home. Because, you know, I live in a village that if the roads are bad, you wouldn't be able to get out.
Mm.
But having said all that, you know, I have seen the gritter going through sometimes thinking, well, why is it going through tonight? Yes, it's a bit frosty, but it's not really slippy, and all I can say is I pray for no snow.
Mm.
But it's not for this winter, it would be for the
It's the
following.
following winter. Pray for mild winter.
Yes, but, you know, we will get bad winters.
Yes. When we spoke at the NCALC meeting for the 20 largest councils in the Northamptonshire county a few months back, you were outlining a number of areas, yourself and Danny Moody, that may devolve down to parish level from either district or county.
I think that would only happen if unitary moved forward, but having said that, there's still some of the services that, you know, as I've mentioned, like weed killing and some of that sort of stuff, that might be something that, you know, I'm saying it to the parish councils as well. I was talking to Kingscliff the other night, and they were saying, you know, we've got lots of white lining that needs doing, and some parishes and some towns are sitting on large lumps of money, you know, because of developments, etc. I'm not saying that's your situation at all, but, you know, they've said we could, you know, probably pay for some of this to be done. And we're not saying, no, you can't. We're saying, thank you very much. But, you know, again, this is for you to decide if there's things that you see as a priority in the town that we can't afford to do, then please talk to me about it.
And also, certainly, as a parish level council, we punch way above our weight. Now, we're one of the highest per capita precept rates in the county, but we provide a lot of services. When we were at that meeting, Emma the clerk was with me there, and we were listening to what was being suggested, and a lot of it we were ticking them off and saying, done it, done it, done it. We do all those now in terms of things like grass cutting, ground maintenance, and a whole range of services we provide for Oundle that other parishes much larger than us don't provide for their residents. And I think the two on that occasion that stood out that we weren't providing were road sweeping and repairing potholes. I think they were the two that we came away from that one thinking, well, that's two more devolved things we might one day have to look at.
I mean, if unitary happened, there
Yes.
would be an amount of money allocated to each locality
Yes,
for, you know, the councillors and the, you know, the local councillors as well, to determine how that money was spent.
yes.
And it might be on the library or whatever.
Yes,
But we're not in that situation, I'm afraid.
We went to, Emma and I went to the NCALC AGM on the 7th of October. Your deputy leader, Councillor Golby, gave a very good talk there again on devolving of powers, and one of the things he came up with there was the libraries. Lots of parishes are looking at taking over their local library to provide the service. And other things were mentioned. We found some amusement at the time. I don't think we're finding amusement in it now. The idea that we might have to go out and buy a gritting lorry, and we'll be getting the lads out at 1 in the morning to grit the roads. But it that was another item
I
we
think
mentioned.
in the consultation document it does say about the grit bins won't be filled. So it is something that we'd look to towns and parishes.
So there'll be no sand and salt in the grit bins for us to spread ourselves.
But I dare
Unless we
say
provide it.
the final outcome of this would be that, you know, the highways contractor would provide the stuff, but you'd have to pay for it.
We'd have to pay for it from our precept. So that is something I think that we must, as a very minimal service, I think we must consider at our next finance meeting and
But
look
this
to put
isn't
it
for
in the
this
budgets.
winter, it is for next winter, but you
Yes.
still need to get it in your budget
Yes,
for next winter.
yes, we've got to get it in the budgets for the year beginning in April,
Yeah.
which will be for the following winter. Yeah. Councillor Humphreys, did
Yes,
you want to come back on that?
I'm sure, so I don't want to make it a political issue, which it obviously is, but it does say in this news release that it's, especially about the buses, that are not commercially viable, predominantly in rural areas. Now, Northamptonshire is a rural area, and we are, in my opinion, and Oundle is a rural town. It might be big for all of us here, but actually it's 12 miles to Peterborough, 12 miles to Corby, equivalent to Kettering. If you haven't got any money, you haven't got a car, and all those things, it's extraordinarily difficult to get in and out of Arundel. And rural areas are being endlessly penalised. It doesn't happen in big cities. These things will be happening in
Yeah, they're
in
commercial,
Northampton.
you see there, because of the
And
number
it
of
seems to me that there should be more of a, you know, instead of, this isn't a
Yeah.
criticism of yourself, but there should be more of a, instead of rolling over and putting feet up in the air and saying, oh, well, it's going to happen. No, it shouldn't happen. There should be a more fuss being made about these cuts.
Oh, there will be. I've no doubt that people will make a lot of fuss. You know, as soon as it came on the table, we said, whoa, you know, this is unacceptable to us politically, but all of the money is being absorbed by social care, and we're under massive pressure to help health to get people
No,
out
I
of
understand
hospital.
that, but it's
So that
almost
it's
like it's something that needs to be pushed forward, because we're in the process of doing this our neighbourhood plan, as you are well aware. Now, all of these things, budgetary, just as that on its own, impact now
Yeah.
on our neighbourhood plan. The budget, all of these things that people are somehow taking for granted, not for granted, I don't mean that in that quite that way, but they assume they're going to happen. In the future, they're not going to happen. And we're putting out forward a neighbourhood plan saying, we'll do this, we'll do that, this is going to be a wonderful place. Actually, it's not, because you won't be able to get out of it, you won't be able to. I know lots and lots of people in the town that are very, very poor, that have to struggle on buses, that have to get to Corby if they're shopping on buses, that do use the Call Connect system. And it's
And
all slowly.
Youngsters on
carpet.
apprenticeships who
Absolutely.
need to
Slowly
get
the
to college.
carpet's
So
being
I
ripped away from
massive
underneath them.
completely understand everything you say.
Any other councillors with a question? I'll throw it open. Just a couple of questions from the floor. I know Councillor Stern was.
So have I got a question? Yes, I have.
Yes, I'll allow a question from the floor.
We've had here, and thank you for your dissertation tonight, and the latest that we've seen, you are chairing a cabinet meeting on Thursday to make the decisions.
To make the decision to go to consultation. That's it. That's all the decision is at this stage.
So
It then goes through a long budget setting process that in December the proposal will then be back to Cabinet again. It will then go out to finance scrutiny, will be scrutinised before it then comes to full council next February. So the Cabinet meeting is just to put these proposals out to consultation. It isn't a decision.
And will Arundel Town Council get a copy of that consultation? Will they be involved in that consultation?
Well, have you already been sent a press release? It may not have gone out yet because it's got to wait for Cabinet approval to go to
Haven't
They
had
come to
it.
ENC, that's why they're around the
We've
table
had it
tonight.
via ENC, but we haven't had it directly.
Yeah, it's because the decision hasn't been made yet
Yeah.
to go to consultation. But then it will be.
So we'll
widely
get the
read.
consultation document, in fact, can I insist that they do,
Yeah, they will.
for us to discuss and us to work out what's best for Arundel.
Yeah.
But if you're not making decisions on Thursday, then fine.
No, it's just, do we go to consultation or not? And, you know, obviously this is why, we've never done it like this before, it's never been as early as this before. And I'm pleased that it is, because it does give more time, so that people don't feel so pushed into it, as they often do when we only announce in December.
Yeah.
Do either of our two residents want to ask a question? While you've got the chance with Councillor Smith here.
Not a question, but in our democracy, the urban masses make the policy, and people who live in rural areas suffer. I thought everybody knew that.
The only other thing I'll say before I close on this now is that I've been making really strong representations about fairer funding. That Northamptonshire historically has been underfunded, always has been, whether it's us, police or health. We're all underfunded. Local government in general is underfunded in comparison with other parts of the country. And there is a big movement, because it isn't just us, Cambridgeshire are the same, Lincolnshire are the same, you know, a number of our neighbours are the same, that other parts of the country get far more funding per head of population than we do. So, you know, we've been doing a really big push on it. Government say they're listening, and they're saying they will do something about fair funding. Didn't actually say when, but they said they will do something about it. But in the meantime, we have to present a balanced budget each year. We haven't got any choice over that. But also, you know, there's a lot of noise about you need more money in the system to deal with social care, that you know, the growth in demand for social care, which is taking all of our money, that they'll do something about that. So we await the budget, we await the announcements for local government funding, which don't come until December. So that may change the picture. I just don't know, but we have to assume that things are as they are now.
I think that's fair.
I'd like to thank Councillor Heather Smith for coming tonight and speaking to us.
I'm happy to, you know, as things move along, come back, and I will
Please
say
do.
to officers that you really all want to understand what it would cost if you decided and if it was going to close, etc., etc.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Many thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Right, I'm going to move on with item 103, public participation from interested parties or members of the public. Do any of the members of the public, Councillor Stern, are you wanting to say something? Or?
Well, I'm just going to wait and hear me out.
Sorry, I've got a visitor who's just arrived as I'm going out the door. Okay, thank you.
I've come over to this because it's something to lean on. I'm just going to give you a very brief, and I don't mean anything other than very brief, overview of what we're doing in terms of the cycle track system, Oundle, north and south, west and east. If, as a teaser tonight, it's something else you want to know more about, then Jake and I, who are in the middle of it all,
Yes.
can come and talk to you separately in detail. So essentially what we've got at the moment, I guess you won't be able to see the maps, so I'll just do a rough drawing, but it will be rough. You've got Oundle here in the middle, you've got the Peterborough Green Ring, which is a whole circle.
Use a darker pen.
Darker pen.
What?
Oh, try green.
Can't see your charming pink.
Cheap, but it's very
Did we have anything presented by interested parties? No. Now the public can't see it.
Oundle.
Yep.
Green Ring, which is coming sort of Elton way, which is going right round the whole of Peterborough, and there's a cycle and walking track all the way around. We have the Greenway, and I've mentioned it a few times, but basically it's a cycle and walking track from Rushton in the south
Yes.
to Northampton in Dayston, and comes up through Rushton, Stanley Lakes, Earthlinborough and to Thrapston. And we've got to Thrapston and we've used all the money that we've got, about 4 million quid. So it's a proper job to doing all of that. So you can bike along that track and there's gates and it's hardcore, it's not any muddy tracks or anything. We've stuck at Thrapston and now we're looking how to get from Thrapston to Oundle and then up from Oundle up to Swarmington perhaps, and then there's a cycle route already in place done by Sustrans, who's the government not-for-profit group that owns most of the old railway tracks. They've got a route up there already, and then we can go up to Peterborough.
Right.
So essentially what Jake and I are trying to do, I'm on the board of Greenway, so we're making all the decisions as they come along. As far as Oundle is concerned, we have recently decided that we will go with Neem Way,
Yeah.
because it's almost there anyway. It's a bit muddy in places, but that can be sorted. We're going to have a choice of 2 ways into Oundle, over the bridge, the footbridge, over the river and under the roadway. There's a way through there in the middle, or we could come down to the 605
Yes.
coming in.
Right.
That's been costed at the moment by Sustransit, what it's going to cost to get to it done.
Right.
Whichever way, we will come into there, and up here, it'll go up to the Sustrans route, in which you can get towards Market Harbour
Yes.
and up to Green Wheel, or anywhere you like.
Yes.
That is fairly straightforward and fairly sacrosanct.
Right.
These 2 elements are in discussion to get the right one. We've had 2 or 3 meetings, and we've got 2 or 3 ideas of how to get into Oundle.
Yes.
We've also recently got the track sorted at Lilford. We've been able to get anything out of anyone down that way, but now they've solved all their problems, we can now use the footpaths at Lilford,
Right.
and we can get to Lilford from Thrapston
Right.
fairly straightforwardly.
Yes.
Once you've got to Lilford, then again it might come up to the 605.
Yes.
So the south will come up there, the north will go up there.
Yeah.
Um,
You've got another one, haven't you, from
Yes.
this new Tresham?
don't jump the gun.
All right. Okay.
This is all called Greenway, and we also have in the neighbourhood plan a cycle track vision, if you like, which basically has an M25, which these will join into in an ideal world, and as you quite rightly say, Tresham Way, which we have a budget of £250,000 to spend to get it sorted, will go to the new garden village at the airport. The airfield there. Oh,
Yes.
that's a strange picture. So that will come in there, that will go up there, and that will come up there. So all of these will be suitable for kids and families and cyclists. It won't all be totally hardcore because we'll use the airfield concrete to make this track.
Yeah.
That'll make it fairly economical. It'll go through all the millions of trees that are now being planted. This might well be the same. It might be the same concrete if you get that way. So that's just a principle of allowing people from Peterborough, people from Oundle and people from Thrapston and anywhere down there
Yeah.
to essentially have the health and safety and leisure with their families on that sort of escapade. Also, as we understand it, you can get a train into Peterborough, go down all of this to Wellingborough or Northampton and get a train back to London, if you choose to do that. Blue Way is the next on, nothing around at the moment, but basically use the Nene all the way on boats, the same sort of thing. So that's the principle of what we're trying to achieve, and we're getting nearer every day. And the Oundle section here, we've been working on for quite some time, haven't we, Jake? We're getting near to that as well.
Have you got a date?
No,
You haven't got a date when
we
you...
haven't got any funding.
Right.
So it's a vision for the moment. What we have done, we three, is we have used our Member Empowerment Fund to do the draft of the document that will hold up from Sustrans, will hold up to all the government funders as a document which, if they get some money, they can bung in our document and say, we'll spend it on that. That's how that money often gets spent nowadays. So essentially, we have a document, or will have a document, in the next couple of months, which will get this sorted and we can bung it into our funding officer at E&C, who's a very good lady, and she will get the money for us somehow, wherever. The same applies to what we do in Oundle. The Tresham Way is hopefully funded by the owner of the estate out here. So that's the principle. Take up no more of your time, unless there's any urgent questions that you want.
One, Phil, if I may, is it, what's the willingness for it to happen on a much higher level? Are the government behind these sorts of schemes? Is there a willingness for it to happen, or are you banging at a closed door all the time?
Well, I think the answer to that is going to be political anyway. There isn't going to be black and white from that point of view. The government are stating on every occasion that any of these sort of projects which affect the health of the people in the area, the leisure facilities of the people in the area, those sorts of things are priority. But that doesn't mean much if there isn't money. Money, like everything, is getting tight, as we were talking with Heather earlier on. Everywhere the money gets tight. But this is the thing that they're spending money on. And there are all sorts of funds that keep coming up. If we use the 605, it would allow cyclists, young kids, to go to school on the bike, which they won't at the moment because it isn't right or good enough for them. So there is a school safety fund that you could maybe trap on. Once we've done the project, it'll go out to everywhere and we'll see what happens. It's the way we've done Greenway before, it's the way we've got £3.5 million before. So it may happen, certainly this will happen. How many of these will do it? In the neighbourhood plan, we've got a lot of these sections in the neighbourhood plan paid for by developers who we've allocated housing to on their sites. So we started on it all, but it's a long-term project. And who knows if it will come off. The government are okay with it, ENC are okay with it, the county are okay with it, because we're all in the same areas. And it's such a logical thing to do, and so much good for everyone, why should we do it? But yes, you're right, I might be banging on the drums for nothing.
With the lottery.
Thanks for that, Councillor Stern. We've had no requests from interested parties sent in to us, so we've not got a consideration. But I'm coming to yours under the District Council report you want to give. That's coming, Councillor Reichold. The next item on the agenda, and I've got to push it along because we're running behind. Mayor's report, very quickly. I've attended a number of meetings again in the last month since the last full council. As usual, I went to the Oundle and District Association of Trade and Commerce, and the next meeting of that on the 1st of November is right here in this room in Fletton House. We're giving them a tour of the council offices, a tour of volunteer action, a tour of the preschool, and they, I believe, may even get a demonstration of ballet. They'll also see some displays on the neighbourhood plan, which we'll place in this room when they come, and they'll hold their next monthly meeting here, and the food will be provided by the Hub, which gives us a chance to showcase what the Hub can do to the traders of the town. I've attended meetings, the Museum Trust meeting, but I've also, prior to that, I attended a meeting of the Management Committee of the Oundle Museum. I'll leave that one till later. It's coming up later on our agenda, where we've got to look at the future structure of the museum. I've had meetings with the rugby club to look at where we're going to build the new workshop. They're in agreement with us building a 16 metres by 12 metres, sorry, 16 by 10 metres workshop, but they're not too keen on us going to 16 by 12. But we're looking at that to see if 16 by 10 is big enough, and we're progressing that one forward. I met with the chair of Glapthorne Parish Council to talk about a number of issues, mainly neighbourhood plan between ourselves and Glapthorne, and we have a meeting coming up next week with Glapthorne and ENC to talk about our respective neighbourhood plans and how they can pull together. I also attended the JAG meeting. That is a joint meeting between police, the local councils, to look at various local policing and community issues. And Councillor Chesser was also at that meeting. Councillor Chesser has been a regular on JAG for many, many years. The clerk and I, and also former Mayor of the town, Gwen Radcliffe, who is a Vice President of NCALT, the North Ants County Association of Local Councils. The three of us attended on 7th of October the AGM for NCALC and learned a huge amount about some of the issues that Heather Smith was talking about tonight. That really concludes the Mayor's report. Any questions?
No?
Smashing. 10502, if I could have a brief report, please, from District Councillors. Councillor Reichold. The other two seem to have deserted you, Rupert.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You've already heard Councillor Stern's presentation. But just a couple of things I would like to report, Mr. Mayor. I'm still East Northants District Councillor's representative at the Local Government Association Sparsity Group, otherwise known as the Rural Service Network, which represents the more sparsely populated rural authorities, with you trying to make sure that we get our fair share of what government grant is going in the changing circumstances. In that connection, this morning I received information from the sparsity officers, information which clearly hadn't reached Heather Smith before she was out of this meeting, but I'll be forwarding by email to Heather Smith and to you, to Emma, your clerk, tomorrow, putting the picture. In essence, this is information on the latest statement by Department for Communities and Local Government, Central Government, on when they expect to implement the Fairer Funding Review. I won't go into details now, you'll be able to read about it. The other point, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to report on is my other external assignment at East Northants Council. I represent East Northants Council as observer on the board of the Community Law Service Northamptonshire, which is a charitable organisation which pays experts, lawyers and other experts to give advice to needy people with problems like debt and difficulty in paying their council tax, many other problems, divorce, separation, liability of relatives, you name them, they do it. This is my first year as ENC's observer on that board, and I attended my first board meeting a week ago. And I must say I was very impressed by the commitment and professionalism of the board. So I'm confident, Mr. Mayor, that Community Law Service Northamptonshire certainly earn and put to good use the funding we give them, and they receive funding from other sources as well. That is all I have to say.
Thank you very much for your District Council report, Councillor Reichold.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I will now depart.
You may. We now come on to item 106, signing and sealing. I'll read the resolution that any two councillors and the proper officer may seal any document required by law to be issued under seal on behalf of the council, and that is our Standing Order 14B. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Fuller, a seconder. Councillor Chappell, and all those in favour. That's unanimous. And we move on now to 107, Town Matters. 10701, to consider purchasing mobile flashing speeding signs to put up in Oundle. Over to the clerk.
This was something that Councillor Peel asked about, I think, at the finance meeting.
He did, yes.
But he's not here and hasn't actually given me any other information, so...
We're going to have to defer it then to a future meeting. That's unfortunate that he's not here. It does help to get us back on track.
Yeah.
Albeit it would have been nice to have resolved it. 10702, to consider a request from a resident regarding the clock in the Market Square.
Yeah, this is an email that we've received from somebody that wanted it to be brought up at the council meeting. They're obviously a bit disappointed that the clock is not working, and have asked whether it be, if it's not, we're not going to amend it, can we remove it? But obviously we're stuck in a situation with regards to the building shutting.
We have actually made a resolution not to do it until we know what's happening to the building.
That's correct.
There was a resolution of the council.
Yes, there was, yeah.
Is it whether
So
the mayor
that's
will
all
say?
that needs to be said.
We are aware. This will be sorted, but the building is sorted.
It's right twice a day.
It's right twice a day, yes.
has to be resolved. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not.
Yes, we are working on it. It's something that we are working
It's come
on.
up
Put the
about
time
3
up on the
times.
digital
isn't it?
sign at the side.
Yeah.
And I had a letter yesterday from Norwich and Peterborough saying that they are now closing the building.
Mm,
I think it's on the 1st of December they
Yeah.
close.
it is, yes.
So I don't know whether we should be making sure that it's all of a sudden somebody doesn't move in there and then we can't get access to our plot.
We need to be put in contact with the purchaser. It's all very...
Has it been purchased?
As far as I know, they have been carrying out dealings with somebody.
Okay.
Somebody is in the process of purchasing. They didn't tell us what they were doing until it reached a very late stage. Councillor Chappell.
Well, that purchaser is going to have a copy of the legal agreement that we entered into, because
Yes.
it was bound to have been disclosed to them, so I'm sure they'll be well aware of the interest of the town council. What is slightly surprising and disappointing is that I thought that we had informally invited the Building Society to sort of talk to us as a
Yes.
No, they
potential,
didn't.
potentially
Yeah.
interested,
I
and they
know.
clearly haven't even bothered.
We have a number of interests because Hanneke, I know, our estates officer, is concerned whether or not we're going to be able to get in there for the switching on of the lights. And I believe is that 2nd of
That's
December?
the next day.
The very next day after it shuts, we need to get into that building to connect the electricity supply to the Christmas tree, which stands outside it. We've always had an arrangement where we've had power from there, going way back to the days when we owned that building. And we need to know where we're going to be before the town is complaining they've got no Christmas tree lights or Christmas lights, because I believe I'm going to stand outside that building on that day and switch our lights on.
We'll plug it into you, Rory.
So-
That'll be all right. You'll be on a little bike going. We'll have to take turns
But
to
in
the
fact,
council.
I'll send to you afterwards.
So,
You don't actually switch them on.
Anyway.
I mean, is that, Roy, is that, I mean, we're being flippant about it, but is it something that's going to be a problem?
it's something
Yeah.
Hanneke's pursuing, I believe.
Yeah.
We're chasing this
trying
up.
to-
We need an
yeah.
answer from them. They seem reluctant to say where they are with their conveyancing of the property. I don't know whether Councillor Chappell, being a solicitor, would be able to bring any more weight to bear on them, talking to them.
I can always try. I don't see why they
Use
should.
the right words.
It might be...
Just an observation, we've only just agreed in principle a sale. They ain't going to be completed by the beginning of December, are they? In recent, in past experiences, it doesn't happen in 2 months.
But it's access to the building, I think, was the problem.
Yeah. So, but I mean, what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
people still own it, won't they? With the time we need it, it's
But
expensive.
they might not be here, they might be
Yeah.
miles away.
We have no idea who the purchaser of the property is, what their intentions with it are, whether they're going to occupy it themselves, sublet, or let to tenants. We have no idea at all of their plans. There are 2 sitting tenants, and I don't know whether they know anything more than we do. But we've got a number of things that we have interests in that building that we need to declare to the new owner, and they need to be aware of. I mean, we also connect the bunting in the summertime, the bunting for our festivals, crisscrosses the marketplace and connects in several places to that building. We need to know that we'll still be able to do that. Otherwise, we could find that we can't actually put the bunting up in the town this summer when we have festivals. So there's quite a lot of things that
I just thought that we will have put the lights up before the 1st, though, won't we?
we'll have had them up, yes.
So hopefully they'll be up and we'll have sorted out the issue with the electrics.
Yes, but if the outgoing owner turns off the electricity supply on their way out the door on the 1st, whether we'll then be able to switch on the lights, the town lights on that day, is another matter. It's something we've certainly got to
Yeah.
follow
I
up.
think that's the point I was trying to make with it, was always that,
Yeah.
if we can't get any people who talk to their things, they'll be the ones the building.
Mm. all we can do is talk to Yorkshire, who took over the Norwich and Peterborough Building Society group, keep talking to Yorkshire Building Society and try to get them to realise our predicament. The clerk will continue to do that. And Hanneke. Moving on, 10703 to report on emails received from East Northants Council regarding section 106 money available for Oundle Town Council.
Yeah, well, these are some emails that I've received, so I just put a little report together to so that you know the amounts of money. The first amount is already in, they have it, and we've just got to come up with a way of spending it. And like I said, just as a suggestion to see what we could or couldn't do, you can't really do maintenance work on things you've already got, but you can upgrade. So like with regards to skate park, you could upgrade it with new equipment. You wouldn't be able to fix it.
It's just basically get new equipment.
Yeah, and it's all for outdoor recreational activity for adults and youths. The boardwalk is the second amount of money. That's £46,000, and that they've said yes, you could use that for a new boardwalk. So that one is we've just got to come up with a plan and a cost and send it to them. That's it really.
That's
yeah,
it. Councillor Chappell.
Well, clearly we need to refer it to estates, but could estates also look at whether or not any of the funds there might usefully be employed in the project that Councillor Stern's just been talking to us about?
Yes, I was thinking.
Because clearly, whilst it's only relatively a drop in the ocean, for those links within Oundle itself, it may prove an invaluable source of funding, and it will tie in, hopefully, with the start of the whole neighbourhood plan thing, with the cycleways that may come as part of that. So I think that needs to be part of the brief to the Estates Management Committee.
I could ask the contact I've been speaking to, Beverly at ENC, if you've got any ideas, she then puts it to the planners and then they come back and say yes you can and no you can't.
I'd be very surprised if they said no.
Yeah, so that would be ideal.
One thing we've had on the stocks for a very long time is getting, and we've talked about it, and we've looked at it and done work on it, a cycle, as it were, train route through the town up to the primary school. And that would entail using one side of the road on Glatthorne Road, which is something we have done work on in the past.
Yes.
And I would, that's where I would like to spend the money, so that we could cut down on the number of cars trying to access
That
the
was one of the
primary
proposals in the
school.
neighbourhood
That's
plan.
safety, that's about safety as well as health.
We've actually got an amount of money of 132,000 that comes from section 106 money that has been earmarked as part of that cycle
Well,
track.
that would be fantastic.
And that is what's mentioned in our neighbourhood plan. And although that money, we've had that money for some time, I was worried obviously that because you only have a period of time to spend it. She said because it's already committed, that's fine. So we can hold on to it until we start.
Ex-Councillor Davis is very keen to actually lead the project in terms of run the train and get the parents on board and get the whole thing organised.
So yeah, I mean, if you wanted to add that, then you'd have near enough, well, you'd have over 200,000 if you
it'd be
added the two
fantastic.
together.
That would carry that project quite a way forward, I
It
think.
would.
I do think if you don't mind, I think David's idea as well, Councillor Chappell, some seed funds, I think would be useful, rather than put it in one big pot, which I think is a good idea. It's already got substantial funding. I think a proportion of that should be put on the project that we just heard, because I think that is amazing.
There's a lot of PR in that as well, as far as we approach the going to public with the neighbourhood.
Cycling.
If we put our money where our mouth is,
Yes,
it makes an enormous amount of difference.
Yeah, we must make sure that's one of the slides in our presentation.
Definitely.
One of the marketing slides. Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah.
Well, I'm standing
And the
up
other
for
one.
the other one.
Oh, no,
yeah,
that's good.
It's been going a lot longer. We've really been trying.
I mean, I
to
think
get that for
what
a very
Councillor
long
Fuller
time.
said is it's some, not all of the money goes to there,
Yeah.
but some seed money towards the other issue is important.
Okay, we'll move on to 10704, to confirm arrangements for Remembrance Sunday Parade and approve expenditure on the road closure signage.
Yeah, just Hanneke and myself have been talking about this, and we've also asked John if he can help on Sunday. We've got these barriers, so we're going to use these barriers with cones to close off the roads, and John's going to come out on the Sunday morning and just leave them to one side so that whoever's marshalling that road can just put them out and then obviously clear them away when it's finished.
Right.
We need some, they're sort of, we need a couple of these. These are the ones that we can stand in the road in front of the barrier. And they are about £19 excluding VAT each. And then also we're going to spend £150 on yellow signs that we could put up a week or so before, put them up in the town, just to say that it's Remembrance Day. We're not actually putting a date on it, because then we can keep using them each year. And the cost of those, we need to get 5 of those, is £150. Just to say that we've sort of sorted out putting the barriers, and once it's finished, John will come and collect them all in and take them away. So that's...
Right. We need then a proposal to approve proposed by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Humphreys. Those in favour of, do you know the total spend?
Yeah, it'll be 100.
Yeah, let's not look at the numbers.
150 plus about another 50, so £200.
Around £200. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. I will say I spoke to Les Starks, the chair of the Royal British Legion tonight, and I think he's looking for the road closures on the Sunday to be between about 1:30 and 4:30. I think the parade will form up outside Oxfam at about 2 p.m. and they will move up from there, arriving at the War Memorial and forming up in New Street at about 2:15 to 2:18, depending on the speed at which they can march. They will move the barriers when the church service begins. They move the barriers in West Street and on the marketplace. They move those barriers to somewhere near the War Memorial to protect New Street, because the parade will come back to there for the salute. But the rest of the town will then be open to traffic. The salute takes place after we come out of church. Councillor Chesser.
Can you just recap for me when New Street's going to be, as it were, closed to traffic? Did you say
1:30.
1:30.
Because I'm just thinking people are likely to be going into the places like the Talbot and the eateries to eat before then, and they won't be, they'll park their cars earlier than that and then not be around.
Well, we've got the signs up to say no parking, those yellow signs.
Right, so
And I
they will be there earlier, will they? That's
Oh,
right.
they'll be in place days
Yeah.
before to
And I
say
think
that.
That's fine.
I think the
Yeah.
British Legion are actually going to come down and look a bit before 12 and just see
Yes.
if there's any car. I don't know what they'll do if there are cars there.
Yeah,
How
that was my
But they are
question.
going to
Yeah.
march.
All they
out
can
with
do is
people.
chase round and try and find the
Yeah.
owners of cars, but there's not a lot they can do without traffic wardens there, who are unlikely to be available on a Sunday. Sorry?
They've been warned when they park,
Yes.
so it's on them.
Yeah. So that's the situation with that. Hang on, I'm still. The situation at the moment is we're still short of volunteers to man these barriers. Councillor Peel has volunteered to man one of them. The rest of us will probably be in church for the church service, and we'll be expected to be at the War Memorial for the earlier bit of it, the laying of the wreaths. So it's difficult for councillors to do that, but we have got a couple of other volunteers, a couple of Camilla Sherwin's volunteers who do the food festival and things like that, have volunteered to come along and assist, but we really need a few more. So if anybody knows of anybody who might be recruited to help man the barricades on that day, to close off the roads and then move the barricades and reopen the roads at the end, I think that would be most helpful. I'll try Camilla's volunteers again and see if we can get one or two more of them. We really need about half a dozen people at least in high-vis jackets to man barriers at 3 locations. One will be at the junction of New Street with Milton Road and Blackpot Lane. The other one will initially be somewhere down on the marketplace, and the third one will be by the Catholic Church at the end of West Street. But we've certainly got to protect that march when they're marching from Oxfam up to the marketplace, and protect them while they're on the marketplace until after they've taken the salute and dispersed. So we need some more volunteers for that. Okay, I'll move on then to item 108. 108.01, to elect a member for the Finance and General Purposes Committee. The reason for this is that we're very close to quorum, and if anybody is away, we won't be able to have a Finance and General Purposes Committee meeting, and therefore we won't be able to approve our budgets and various things if that happens between now and January. So we are looking for a proposal for a councillor who's not already on Finance and General Purposes, whether they will join us on that committee.
Who are the possibles?
Everybody's on it even. I know I'm not, because I came the other night.
Of those present tonight, only Councillor Chappell and myself are on it. So it's amongst the other 4 of you. We need a volunteer, please.
So I'm not going to do any more.
I'm rubbish with money, forget it. I really am bad.
I'm already on 2. I mean, if they weren't evenings, I'd consider it, but I'm already giving up more meetings than I want to do.
How about Councillor Chesser? You've been on it before.
You actually came last week.
You on?
You came last
I know. I'm keen I am. Go on then. I thought that was on too long.
Do I have to propose?
Don't grumble.
A proposer
I
for...
will propose the wonderful councillors.
I would have great pleasure in seconding that.
Second, Councillor Chappell.
Well done.
Those in favour?
You haven't asked for those against.
Councillor Chesser, I now announce you duly elected onto the Finance and General Purposes Committee.
The worst.
Good luck.
Yeah.
The next item, 108.02, to receive the Clerk's monthly report.
Yes, I don't know if you've had a chance to read it. I mentioned about the Northampton Count meeting that I attended. I've also been to see Justin Jeffrey at QI, and we had quite an interesting talk about how we can use the Oundle info, certainly to advertise a neighbourhood plan, and it links to Facebook and Twitter, and he's regularly getting 2,500 to 2,800 or 900 a month people visiting the site. So we're just sort of working together. He's actually linked all of the YouTube meetings now on Oundle Info, so people can go to that to hear these meeting recordings. And what was a few other things? We've had the normal sort of requests from members of the public. and we had our Heart Start training on last Friday. Friday the 13th, when it wasn't unlucky, everybody was all okay.
We survived.
Yeah, we all survived. It was very interesting. We all had to go with the defibrillators, so it was useful. And that's that, really.
Thank you very much, Clark, for that report. 10803, to determine the council's position with the museum trust composition. I had an email from John Hadman, who chairs the management committee, asking if somebody called Heather Lomas could attend the next trustees meeting. Not knowing who Heather Lomas was, I said I'd like to know a bit more, and I had heard rumours that they were thinking of not having town councillors as trustees of the museum. We've been trustees of a museum trust since 1993, when the whole thing was set up, and the composition, you've seen all the documentation that I've sent you. It shows that we represent 4 of the 8 trustees, and we also provide them with an awful lot of their funding, and we are the landlords. We provide them with their property at a very reasonable price. So I was then told by return of email that it's not so much getting rid of you, it's more the proportion of you, indicating they wanted to cut down the number of us, so that we had less of a say. I then attended their management committee meeting and learned a lot of what was going on. What's happened is that they've had a body called MDEM, Museum Development East Midlands, who give them a lot of help and encouragement and training and support in a variety of directions. They were offering them £1,500 to help them along with various things, and suggested as part of that they'd like to come in and do a complete governance review on the library.
Or even the museum.
Sorry, the museum, sorry. What made me say library? Shows you where my mind is going next. The museum. The management committee had been led, I think, by MDEM, by this Heather Lomas, to the idea that we had some kind of a problem with wearing 2 hats, being both trustees of the museum and being councillors, where we are also the landlord. I pointed out to them that that situation occurs almost every day for all of us, where we have to balance various interests, and very often taking the interests of the town in preference to our own interests when we act as councillors. And I also pointed out that we are trustees of the Queen Victoria Hall. All councillors are trustees of that, and that next month in our meeting we will have a half-hour meeting of the Queen Victoria Hall Trust, where we will be acting as trustees. At the end of that meeting, we will then begin the full council meeting for November. We will put on our other hat as councillors, and we will be considering some of the same issues from the other side. We've managed that very well. It's been a trust, I believe, since 1903. Quite how long? Well, Oundle Town Council's been involved with it since 1974, when it was formed, and the previous Urban District Council before that, from whenever that was formed. So I don't think that there's a problem with us being trustees of the museum and councillors. They also said that, and I think there's something there that we can look at, and that's why I've given to the trustee councillors tonight, given them a copy of the various forms of charitable organisations that can operate, because the old Declaration of Trust is perhaps now not the best document, not the best form of trust company that we can have for the museum. There are a number of options that we need to look at, and all have their advantages and disadvantages, so we'll need to weigh that one up and then decide and come back to council as to which one we ought to follow. Obviously MDEM had come up with their preferred option, and they were pushing very hard that when we went to our meeting last week, that in fact we were going to have a sort of surprise attack where they would have put to us the idea that we all suddenly accept this and the whole thing changes over. Heather Lomas didn't come to the trustees meeting. She is coming to a future one to explain her actions. And I think we need to be looking at all aspects of the Museum Trust. We need to look at how the trustees operate, and we need to look at also how the management committee operates. They were formed long after the trust was formed in a separate arrangement to actually run the day-to-day side of things, but they report to the trustees. It's rather concerning that they seem to have gone and spoken to somebody else behind the trustees' backs about the way the trust should operate. So we've now, I don't think it was done with any malicious intent. I think it was all done rather innocently, I think, but they need to think through exactly how the thing is run. We need to look at what the management committee does, we need to look at what the trustees do, and we need to have another meeting with the Museum Trust and sort this all out, and also get it approved by council as to how we function. If in fact we are to continue supporting the museum. We need to make sure that what we've got down there, we have got some assets. Because of the kind of assets they are, they find it very difficult to value them. They find it impossible to insure them. Because if you've made an insurance claim, what would you claim? You can't have them replaced. We can't create another Roman brooch or something. It can't be done. So it's very difficult to measure the assets, but we do need to look very carefully at the way the museum is run, bring it up to date, give it a full governance review ourselves. I think we're the best placed people to do that, and then talk to MDM about the services they provide for the museum in helping out. Just before I lose my voice, does anybody have any comments they want to make on this? Councillor Chappell.
24 years ago, I was one of those involved in the setting up of the museum from the council's side. Indeed, I was only a signatory to that initial Declaration of Trust. I think I was actually the author of the Declaration of Trust and the subsequent amendment to the Declaration of Trust. I was slightly surprised when this sort of blew up out of nowhere, when I, of all people, hadn't even been spoken to about it. And the first thing that went through my mind is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the system has frankly seemed to work for many, many years, and I've never had anybody from the management committee coming to me as a trustee and saying, we've got a problem because. I can see some merit in a review, because it may be that there is a better structure, particularly from the point of view of protecting trustees. But I do think they need to be awfully careful about biting the hand that feeds them. This council set up the museum. It was first opened in the first floor of the old then drill hall. I remember it well. I was actually involved in the official opening. I seem to recall that my daughter, who was then an extremely small girl, handing a bouquet to, I think it was Lady Brassey, who was actually opening it at the time. And I would be very concerned, actually, if this council didn't continue to play a very prominent role in the running of that museum. It is, in many respects, an offshoot of this council, and is largely funded by this council, and has always operated in premises owned by this council. So any suggestion that somehow the council should be relegated to a sort of backroom role, or frankly got rid of altogether, would seem to me to be entirely misconceived. I'm quite happy with the idea of an investigation of all of this, with the matter coming back to full council for a report at some stage. And I think we should have a meeting as the trustees with this lady. But at this stage, I have to say, I certainly wouldn't want to see us rushing into anything.
No.
And I do feel we need to maintain the present balance, if I can call it that, between trustees who are councillors and trustees who are not.
Councillor Chesser.
The whole trusteeship thing needs to be looked at, because people's lifestyles have changed, and there's a much higher turnover of councils now on the council, for one thing. And one of the problems, practical problems, is signatories, because they're forever having to fill in new forms for different signatories. That kind of thing, just as we have that on the council, it is a pain. So I think we've got to, as it were, update anyway. And the other thing I've noticed from attending meetings is that actually there's usually more presentation by the town council than there is by their own trustees.
Yes.
And so there's been some fairly slack management, if you like, on the museum's part, and they've fallen into a kind of just, as you say, just let's keep going, rather than actually keeping to the rules of their own constitution.
Yeah, I mean, the original constitution was there would be 4 town councillors as trustees. It would be the mayor, deputy mayor and 2 others, and they would be joined by 4 other trustees, 1 from each of 4 local bodies. 2 of those bodies have disappeared with time, and they replaced them with members of their own management committee. That was all part of the amended trust document, so it was all above board, but you end up with a situation where, and in fact, one of the ones who represents one of the other bodies is in fact chair of the management committee. So the management committee have 3 trustees currently on the board of trustees. So one of the functions of the trustees is to manage and oversee the work of the management committee. So it's a bit of an incestuous arrangement, really, if you elect yourselves to the trustees board, where you then keep an eye on yourself. That side of it itself needs looking at, as to whether or not the management committee ought to be trustees. They've said that they've been worried that some councillors have not been very interested in the museum, and they've had people who've shown no interest whatsoever and don't really know what it does. And they have also said it's a problem that they're getting different trustees each year as councillors, especially as the mayor changes each year. They've got somebody different chairing the meetings each year. So what they've suggested would be, part of the new arrangements would be that when we get fully elected at a full election, which next happens in 2019, we would then serve for a term of 4 years until the next full election. Those elected at by-elections or whatever in the meantime would come along to fill vacancies on it, which may arise in between times, but you would serve a 4-year term, the same as you serve a 4-year term as a councillor. That they think will give some continuity. They're also suggesting that the other 4 trustees, the non-councillor trustees, would also serve a 4-year term. So that would give some stability to the board in terms of its constitution and its decision making. But a lot of the other things need looking at. Last year, for the first time ever, I started looking at what every room in this building and every room in the courthouse, which we've had for some years, what every room was costing, and produced those costs, looked at what we get in the way of income where we rent rooms out, either by the hour or on leases for a term of years. We looked at each and every room, and in the courthouse overall, now that we've filled all the rooms there with tenants, now that we're no longer in there, we've got tenants occupying the whole of the building, and overall we have more income, and I've got my fingers crossed when I say that, because we've just had a couple of large bits of expenditure, one for a hole in the roof, which it comes up in a few minutes, and one for the lift, which has been an eternal problem to us. But that aside, we are in the black. We are in profit overall in the courthouse. The money coming in from our tenants outweighs the expenditure on the building. And we are charging a reasonable, fair rent to a lot of start-up businesses and giving them an opportunity to start a business at a fair and reasonable start-up cost. So we're doing a good job with that, and we're meeting our costs. However, having said that, the museum itself, they pay a rent net of VAT of I think it's £1,473 a year. They see it as £1,700 because they can't claim their VAT back, but it's net of VAT as we charge it is £1,473. They occupy about a third of the building, so the total costs of that third of the building is costing us about £9,000. So there's about 7,400 and odd pounds of loss we make on the museum. So we have been heavily subsidising that museum for many, many years. Ever since they moved into Courthouse, we've been heavily subsidising the cost of those rooms. Now, what we're doing with other tenants that we've got, we're saying for those that are charitable organisations, which the Museum Trust is one, we're saying provided they meet the costs, then we are happy. But they are obviously with the current lease, and while that current lease exists, we can't do anything about it. But they are paying a lot less than it costs us. And I think one of their concerns might also be that their rent will increase quite considerably. If they have to suddenly pay £9,000 a year when they have a new lease in order to meet the fair costs of that proportion of the building. So those are some of the issues that we've got with the museum. But I think we've given it to you tonight so that you're aware of what's going on. We need to take this away and talk to the trustees, talk to the management committee, and decide exactly where we're going. We also need to be sure that the music, yes, I've seen the hand up. We also need to be museum has a real purpose, that we're not running a very expensive hobby for one or two people, that the museum is still of value to the town, it is an asset, and that people are using it, and we try and help them to get more visitors and get more income into the museum. Councillor Chappell.
Well, just a sort of a thought on all of that. One way, of course, of testing how well people in Oundle feel about the degree of subsidy to the museum would be to make it more obvious, which is that when the chance comes, we actually charge them a more realistic rent, but actually grant fund it. And then every year you will actually see that figure of grant funding to the museum, and then if people are unhappy about that level of grant funding, presumably we would get some feedback as a council. We can't do that until, unfortunately, the lease arrangement comes to an end, and we're talking some years away now, but I flag it up for what it's worth.
Councillor Hutton.
I was going to ask whether we get reported how many visitors do use the museum.
They do give us those statistics. They do give us accounts at each meeting. We only have 4 meetings a year of the Museum Trust, but at each of those meetings they produce accounts. I want to look into those figures a lot further than we've looked into them in the past. I didn't make any comment at the trustee meeting, but I intend to follow it through, that we were given a breakdown in some detail of the income, which was exceeded by expenditure for the Museum Trust, and we had one consolidated number for all expenditure, and we were told, quote, I won't bore you with the details. Well, I'm sorry, I think I want to be bored with the details, because I think in future I will need to know, while I'm chairing that Museum Trust, I'll need to know exactly what that money's being spent on. So I think we will be asking a lot of questions, we will be looking at a lot of things, and I want also to find out if we've pumped all this money into the museum in various forms, and we've given them grant assistance, as well as helping with providing premises, we need to look at what sort of assets we've got in that museum, what we've purchased, what we've sold, what we've disposed of in other ways, what's come in from other sources not having purchased it. We need to look at all of this and find out exactly what our museum is really worth. Councillor Fuller.
I would urge sort of light touch approach rather than going ham-fisted to try and sort out the museum. Partly because, as you said earlier, they probably did this out of innocence, and therefore we need to be aware that, I mean, I know some of the people in the museum as well, which helps, but effectively, I think what you're doing is exactly right, that we go in gently, rather than heavy.
Yes.
Although I think there's a reason why we should do a little bit of money.
Yes, we're definitely going in gently. It's all been done amicably, there's no falling out. In fact, Councillor Chester will tell you that the chair of the management committee was pleased that we're having this review, and that I'm looking at things in the way that I'm looking at them at the moment. So I think it's all being done in the right way. There's been some amicable exchanges of email between the chairman of the management committee and myself, so hopefully that will continue, but we need to get to the bottom of it.
And it will strengthen the museum. At the end of the day, it will strengthen the museum. Okay.
Okay, if there's nothing else on the museum, we'll move on. 10804 to discuss ideas for the next edition of the Oracle. We need to get this out end of November or early December at the latest. We want it out there before the Christmas market because it's advertising the Christmas market, the light switch on and everything. We want it out at the end of November. We will probably have to approve it at the Neighbourhood Plan Full Council meeting in early November, about the 7th of November. That gives us only a couple of weeks to get an oracle out there. So we've got 1 or 2 articles that we know are coming in, but that's it. We've got a lot of empty pages. We tried to fill 16 pages. We need a lot of the cycleways. If you'd like to write it, Councillor Fuller, a page is 500 words.
I think we could get...
Consult
would
Councillor Stern and...
would he do it? Would Councillor Stern do it?
he may well do
He
it.
knows it. I mean, there's no point in asking me to do it, because I'll just go straight.
Yeah.
If we could ask him to write the
Yeah,
500...
well, him and Jakes, he said they're both working on it together.
Yeah.
So they might do something.
That has to go.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, you're going to do something about the NP, the neighbourhood plan, what I call it now.
Yes.
NP. I think if that was sort of some way part of the big picture, because that's a big sell, you know, and we've got the whole thing of this oracle, this is the important oracle, this is the start of the journey of the NP. So we really do need to get that bit right. I've seen what you've done, and you've seen my comments, so I'm not going to say anything more about it. But I think this has to be seen as that important oracle. And there'll be others coming, but this is the start of that journey. So we do need to we've got a few articles on it. I think basically we should be focusing on the benefits before we go into the negatives. And we should be really selling it as a big positive thing for the town, with the positives that's going to come from it. And start the point from there, because then it's a high, you're setting the positivity of it all, rather than wait for the surprise at the end. We don't want that, we want the surprises at the front. Then, things like that come, people can start joining the dots. Perhaps another part of it, if you wanted to, is to reflect on the original survey that the whole thing is based upon. Because we keep referring back to this survey, but it would be nice for some statistics, etc., to come out from it, if we felt that it was a good time to bring it in. Because you're telling, the oracle is our chance to tell a story to every single household in the town, and it's probably the most effective way we could do it, in terms of an individual chat between us and the town.
Yep.
So I feel this is probably the most important oracle for the neighbourhood plan that we're going to have.
As the most important oracle, it will come out too late for the public consultation.
It's still reinforcing it, and the public
Yes.
the public thing consultation then should match the contents of the oracle, because you're basically saying, telling a story, and then you're going to repeat that story in a different form to the public, and that's the important thing. So that's why this is important, because this is really saying your stall out for both the consultation as well as the actual things that I'm going to have in my hands. And it's actually a very good way of doing it, I think, because it helps build up the picture. You've got to have that. There's also that other thing with the leaflet drop, isn't there, beforehand? But then we have to add all the other town business as well, and all the other things that we're going to put in. But I think this is important, in fact, very important, for the development of our story.
We can certainly put some stuff on neighbourhood plan in there, but it's going to come too late before the public participation bit comes in.
I think it reinforces it.
Well, it could confuse people.
Well, no, but if your message in the actual, the point is, you're right, it could, if we have two different documents, but if you have the same message, it won't. It will just reinforce it. So therefore, it's very important that what the oracle says matches what we're going to say in public. Okay, that's the key thing that has to be mentioned. Otherwise, you will end up with confusing. But if you're saying the same thing, and then you come out with a document that comes through my door, which says the same thing again, that's just reinforcing.
Councillor Chappell.
We did, of course, have the extremely worrying presentation from Councillor Smith earlier with the threat to our library. And undoubtedly, we have to run a story around that and trying to get some feedback from the town at an early point about their views about how far this council should be prepared to go potentially to save it.
And,
I have a very, very strong view about what we should be doing in this case. But
Charlotte had offered an article on the library, but she probably didn't know what was coming when she offered that article on the library. It certainly wouldn't be along the lines of what Heather Smith has said tonight. The other thing is, we won't know, we'll know what their meeting of Thursday is, well, their meeting is to say that they're going to start a consultation on it. We won't have any outcome in time before we have to approve this oracle. So again, you know, we've got one item that's going to come.
Yeah, but I think we should make people aware that assuming that they do decide to enter into a consultation, then that's news, isn't it? That's what we're reporting.
We want people to respond
and
to
the
that
bus
consultation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole,
We-
the whole,
all of these pieces of paper.
We can certainly put those three items into the oracle. That's
Should I
yeah.
write it?
Absolutely.
Oh, that's why you get.
Well, you're looking for authors. I'm the worst author. I used to do the oracle, so, but I used to do the technical side rather than the articles. Now, the other thing is, with this is a great example of how we can start thinking about moving. You want feedback. So we've got a website. The website and the oracle should be more tied together in some respects. And so this is a classic case where you can put a story in and say, if you've got an opinion, here's a survey on our website that we'd like you to fill in. And this is the joined up thinking that we're trying to get. Plus that survey will also be put up on the notice boards that go around the town.
Go on the annual info, and
Everything.
then go out. And,
Yeah. So, just a few things. I mean, I think there needs to be some positive news as well somewhere. But the neighbourhood plan is a positive news. Trying to think what else there is. But this is important. This is the whole.
I mean,
we
if
would
you
like
have
to
a publication called the Oracle, it needs to be just so. Else it becomes not an oracle at all. It has a, it means something completely different. So it should be a source of
Well, the Christmas market is
good information. And
Yeah, we can certainly we certainly should be covering these items
Yeah.
on pages in the
Too much
oracle.
filling.
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Well, there's the there's a
Yes,
done
done.
bit.
move on.
Is that an idea? Is that helping the show?
That hasn't filled
just need
16
people to
pages,
actually
but
write
I
it.
know.
That's what we need, because we haven't got anybody.
Well, I think Councillor Stone will do hopefully that.
But like with regards to this one.
I think this is the vital stuff.
A bigger font.
No, I mean, you want it written as a sort of journalistic thing, don't you, really? So, I don't know, I'm rubbish at that, but what you want is someone to write something and you can change it. So perhaps I should volunteer to write so that you can change it.
I'll write that in the minutes.
There's a lot of this that can be copied and
It can
pasted.
be copied.
It can copy and paste this in.
No, I think there's a story to that. And then
With
with
the-
the survey monkey or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, we can certainly do that.
there's
Councillor
also
Chappell.
a good news story around the Section 106 money.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
sorry, that's
The
fantastic.
boardwalk being
Yeah.
replaced with all of that, development isn't always bad news because sometimes it will bring benefits.
Have you got the
Yes.
plan? Have you got plans for that cycle thing? For Blackthorn?
Yes, there will be.
That needs to be.
No, I haven't seen it.
Oh,
It does exist, it goes back,
They exist.
what,
Goes back a long time. 10.
well,
they
no,
need to
more
be
recently
dug
than
up
that.
and
Oh,
shown.
well, yes, it's been,
I know it's been talked about forever, but
yeah.
in the last 2 or 3 years, we've looked at some actually quite
We have.
detailed stuff on it. It all went very quiet because of the
Yeah,
cost.
to be able to have Tannic or somebody will dig it out, I'm
Yeah.
Is that starting to build up an oracle of
sure.
sorts?
Particularly as we've got.
That's given us a few pages.
Yeah.
Yes, that's helped. Yes, yes, it all helps. It all helps. But we've got 16 pages to fill to fill an oracle.
Actually,
Well, we
Tell you
could
what,
thank the
really-
museum for their last exhibition because it's now closed, and we could talk about what you've just missed. They could already start selling their next year's exhibition by putting a small article in. You've got that, you've got the Christmas, you've got... I don't think there's any shortage of material. I accept the difficulty is actually pulling it all together and actually producing the document, but I think the material is there.
Can we have a section at the back which is like, I don't know, it's coming up in Alton. Like, they're going to dig up this road. They're going to redo this. We know what's happening. We get a bit of warning, but the town don't know. So recently, they closed New Road They closed 2 roads in Amble and nobody had a clue. You know, we didn't know
They
that.
would have known if they'd read their New Daily News.
Yeah, and we
Always
also, we did put it on our website, we did go on our info and the notice boards as well.
But that's an example. That's just an example. But there's other things
Yeah,
that
the
happen.
trouble is they're very ad hoc, we don't get enough.
But it could be like saying coming up.
We do have events, we're coming up for events,
Yeah.
but
But
we,
it'd be nice to have
The
something.
road
like that.
closures, things are always published.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
That's fair enough. Well, they have to be, I suppose, by law.
Yeah.
But if you had something that we could stream in news at that point at the back, just to say.
Perhaps Councillor Peel would like to put something in about flashing speed signs.
Absolutely. That could be a
Do,
survey.
do people
Actually,
feel
there's a
there's
good
need
thing
for
from
it?
Councillor Peel that he could put it to the town.
There could be something about community speed watch as well. Something from whoever organises that.
we did have something,
We have
not the
something-
last one, the one before.
I'll keep
Yeah.
pushing it.
We
I
have
said-
There's
a
an
bit of-
I
article
don't think
that
councillors are
broadly
reading these productions.
I do, I read my name, but I don't read it all. The Amble
Well,
flood
it doesn't
thing,
matter how
that came at last
But
time,
every
every
time.
time.
Yeah.
That went in the last one,
Did it?
yeah.
Update then, new flood warning.
So would you write a little article about that for us?
So you just be so flood.
Yeah,
warning.
that's fine, yeah.
Just a little.
I'll put that one down, so.
So I think there's enough there. I'll put
Who's
it
going to tell Councillor Peel he's got to write a little article?
Yes.
He is in contact with Alex Haydar, who's running it, so between them they could perhaps do
Absolutely.
something.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to move on because time is pressing. The financial matters, 10901, I'm going to leave the finance reports until later.
Well, later today or later.
Later in this meeting,
Okay.
assuming we ever get there, the way things are dragging on. I'm moving on to 10902,
Yeah.
payments for September.
Yeah, everybody's had the list of payments.
Yes.
Revised this.
You look through them, you happy
Yes.
with them?
Do you want to propose it? I will propose.
Proposition that the schedule of payments for September 2017 as presented at this item are paid up and that all related documentation and cheques are signed. So, proposed Councillor Fuller, seconder. Councillor Chappell, those in favour? That's everybody. 10903, to approve and accept the annual return for the year ended 31st of March 2017 following completion of the audit by BDO Stoy Hayward LLP. Over to the clerk.
Yes, everybody has received a copy of the now completed annual return. It is, as we have to do every year, you have to approve and accept that as a council.
You don't want to propose it,
Is this... I haven't managed to check. Does this take into account the alteration that
There's,
we're talking
what
about?
happens is it isn't altered, it's not altered on this one, it's just been brought up in the,
I appreciate it's
issues
brought up in...
arising.
Yes, so we can't
we,
retrospectively alter it as
no,
it were
it
now.
is because it has been now signed off
Yeah.
by the external auditor, and this I suppose will be something that when we go to the new auditors we'll ask them whether we leave it in there as it is or whether we move it out.
In that case,
Right.
I propose that we approve and accept the annual return.
Proposed by Councillor Chappell, seconded Councillor Chesser. Those in favour? That's unanimous. 10904, to note that the issues arising report and to agree actions required.
I mean, at the moment there aren't really any actions other than the our annual return of this year is now classed as a qualified return. Basically, we've got the amount of money that was spent on the removal of asbestos was put in as a capital spend, but it should have just gone into payments. And so, again, as I said earlier, we've got a new auditor for next year, so we just say, do we leave it as it is, or do you want us actually to take it out?
That's right.
in the light of previously conflicting advice, I think it has to be said.
Yeah, I know, from 2 years previous, and I did ask Paul again about that, and he said previous year they'd asked for it in that column, this year they'd said, no, we don't want it in that column.
Right. 10905 to confirm that the notice of conclusion of audit has been displayed on the notice board from 2nd of October and will remain so for at least 14 days, and that the requisite information of section 1 to 3 of the annual return has been made available by appointment.
Yes, I think, did I send you all a copy of that? Yes, it went up, has been on the notice board since the 2nd of October, and obviously after tonight, a copy of the annual return and the report will go on our website, be available for everyone to see.
Thank you. 10906 to approve the clerk's attendance on the General Data Protection Regulations Made Simple course at Northants Calc on Tuesday the 30th of January 2018. Do I have a proposer for that?
Could we just ask how much it's going to cost? I'm not going to say no, I might say no if it's ridiculous.
The cost of them, I think it's either 28 or 36 pounds. It's one of the two.
It's an enormous sum of money. Proposed by Councillor Fuller, seconded by Councillor Chappell. Those in favour?
I've only done it early because I think it's going to just get booked up really quickly.
It is.
Yeah, I'll just watch this space on this on that item.
Right, and now we come on to the courthouse. 10907 to agree to spend up to £21,400 to repair the Collie Weston roof on the rear of the courthouse.
I'm sorry.
Carry on.
No, it's okay. I was just going to say I was hoping that Councillor Glenn would be here, but I think you know about the quotes, don't you?
We've had quotations in for those, at Estates we selected it, but it's above the limit for Estates spending, so it's got to come to full council for approval. But Estates have had the 3 quotations and have studied them, have selected which one they feel is appropriate, both on cost and performance grounds, and therefore that's the one that's before you tonight.
Do you want a proposer?
We need a proposal, yeah.
I trust the States.
Can you tell us what the range was of the 3 quotes?
It was quite narrow. I can't off the top of my head, but it was.
I have them here. I have. Well, I don't know whether. Do you want to have a look at them? I don't know whether we need to propose the meeting before we read them out, or because I think there was an issue. There are some different prices. So I think there's an issue with.
There are different prices because I think one of them quoted to do the front and the back, and one of them just quoted for the rear sloping roof, which is what we wanted. There were some concerns that one of the prices that was at £16,505 wasn't as complete as the quote for £21,400. So it was felt that something was left out of that quote. They're much wider than I recall when we looked at them before. They are considerably wide in actual fact.
As I recall, we actually just asking for approval to spend up to this amount because the estates are still at some further dispute.
Estates are still looking at some issues with these quotes.
So the idea is to look at this has been the maximum amount of money spent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So
I think you're applying for references, are you?
Yes.
For the companies before.
Yeah. Proposed Councillor Fuller, seconded Councillor Hutton. Those in favour? And that's everybody. Thank you. Yes, you're quite right. It was up to that sum of money.
That's fine.
It says in here up to 21,400.
appreciate this is a slight sort of side diversion, but some councillors may be aware of issues at Riverside Maltings, where one of the buildings there, which is Grade 2 listed, Brent House, is having to have rather expensive repairs done to a Collie Western roof. And I know they've been struggling with trying to find businesses to quote for it. And I'd be very interested to know whether any of the ones that have quoted for us have not been approached by the people there. So perhaps if the clerk is willing to share the names of those people with me,
Yeah.
I could check whether or not that's the case, because there are residents there who are very concerned, because at the moment they're facing a potential demand for a £4,000 payment,
Right.
additional to their service charge, which for elderly people could be extremely worrying.
Yes, I'll let you have them.
Thank you.
Right. If we move on to 10908, to receive the minutes from the Finance and General Purposes Committee held on the 10th of October. Those were in your pack. Unless there are any questions on that, you've got the information. I would suggest that we move on because
Do you want us to propose it and second?
I think we just like
We just
receiving
receive
these
No,
it.
it's
eventually.
Just to
note
receive
that
it.
it's the committee that will approve
Yeah.
them in due course.
Yes.
Move on.
110 is planning matters. 11001 to receive the minutes from the planning committee meeting held on the 3rd of October.
Well, the same principle in a sense applies. The copy is in the pack. Just as an aside, I would mention that Councillor Neville Oakes was unable to attend that meeting, and consequently we didn't have our usual presentation, and it kind of highlighted the difficulty of depending upon a councillor to produce information for the planning committee. So the F&GP looked at the possibility of this council acquiring the suitable equipment so they can generate that kind of a presentation in-house in future should it be necessary. And I know that that's still being investigated by the clerk, but just as a point of information really.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Chappell. 11002 to consider a letter from a resident regarding the footpath stroke cycleway linking the Ashton Road development site with East Road.
I think this is in your pack. I put it on full council, even though I think it's probably something that maybe should go to planning to be looked at a bit more thoroughly. But I don't know if you've managed to have a look at the person in question.
Well,
Councillor Chappell.
I haven't actually been down to look at it, but I have read what's in there and looked at the photographs, and certainly at first sight it seems quite worrying. I do recollect, I'm pretty sure it's the same resident, raising issues in the past, and he does make some reference to that in his letter. Certainly, if the developer has A, not built it in accordance with the specification required, then building control needs to look at that from an enforcement point of view. Secondly, if there is a requirement for maintenance and it's becoming overgrown, and if that is the responsibility of the developer, then again, the developer needs chasing up about that. And I would have thought we could, in a sense, initiate that from full council without referring it on to planning. So we'll almost certainly only say exactly what I've just said now.
I mean, just on a point, and David, Councillor Chappell's made a very, very good point here. If this is back down to the developers, then we have to be absolutely rock solid, whether we go to the neighbourhood plan, about subsequent cycleways that, have, as Councillor Stern said earlier, that are in developers' plans already to connect the cycle route. Now, if they're defaulting on an earlier one by, you know what, we'll just do it as a, you know, a bit here, a bit there. We have to make sure that when we in negotiations with developers, that they're held to ransom, not ransom, they're held to call on these things. It's very, very important for us, for the neighbourhood plan and everything else. And we should just to note that we need to.
Think noted, and I don't know what powers we have there.
I was just going to ask the question, I mean, isn't it, I think the resident has already referred it to East Northants, and isn't it there, up to them to enforce the planning if it's not?
Yeah,
It's already built as.
it is for ENC to do it, but of course it may carry some additional weight if this council throws its own weight behind that of the resident, and if the resident is correct in what he says, then we should be putting pressure on, because frankly developers get away with this sort of thing all the time, because they are just not being held to account. Now, whether this one is or isn't in the wrong, I don't honestly know, but it looks like it.
Right. Councillor Hutton.
I'm not commenting on whether it's been built as per the original plan or not, but I just would like to let you know that I walk down there virtually every day. It's only an access road for four houses drives, so that that's how much traffic we're talking about. Is often those 4 people leave their houses.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But I can also refer it back to planning.
Yeah, push it through.
Right, let's move on to 111 neighbourhood plan. To receive an update on the neighbourhood plan and to report on the proposals for the way forward. We've made some progress. Emma and I have been bashing away at the old working group to try and get a hold of information. We think it's slowly taking shape. We had some information brought in Friday of last week by the former councillor Paul King. Brought us in a pen drive with some stuff on. One of the bits you're going to see is a slideshow showing some maps which we need to have a quick look at and determine whether or not they're suitable for use in the current plan or whether things have moved on from there. While Emma's getting into position, I'll carry on. We've sent a response at our last meeting to Glapthorne neighbourhood plan. In response to the Glapthorne neighbourhood plan, we've sent it to Glapthorne telling them that we have received their plan, and we welcome the fact that they have not built along our boundary. If Emma's ready with the presentation, these are some of the slides that were going to be shown in 2015 in the meeting that was then postponed.
Yes. Just flick through.
So if we can flip through those fairly quickly, Emma, just to get to the
The
maps.
pictures you want.
If you can go through them pretty quickly, we'll
I think the pictures.
pick out the bits of those that are useful in the new presentation. I think we're coming to them now. There we go.
That's nice.
A bit small, but
That's nice. Gives an idea.
as you can see,
Yeah, it's all right. We've got lots of pictures now.
just putting all the little sites.
This is your GIF. You know I talked about animation. That's your animation.
Mm.
That is excellent.
Yeah, well, those are the housing sites coming on one by one onto the plan.
Yeah.
And we can talk about at each of those sites the allocation, but it's whether those maps are sufficient for the purpose now.
I think they are, because you don't want detailed map, you just want an idea of where they're going.
Rough
Yeah.
idea of who, because
It's a
people
nice
will be
map.
worried about
Yeah.
how is it affecting their.
I think it's the one, am I looking at the wrong place? The one that's got 25 houses, is that?
That's by, that's the one that's the one we've been talking about.
Is that the one?
Yeah.
That's the
No,
one
that's
that's
now
going down
30, I think.
That's now 30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are slight
Maybe
adjustments
the
to one or two of
The
those.
numbers
Yeah.
have changed,
Yeah.
for sure.
But I don't think it's not an issue too much if the numbers are slightly.
No, but Mark Benz will have those maps.
Yeah.
They're really good.
And we can change them on the original maps. We can change the detail on his CAD system, and we can reproduce it with the correct numbers on.
No, that's good.
But it's whether that gives the kind of detail we're after, because what we've been trying to do is ENC no longer supply maps, and they got them anyway from Ordnance Survey. Ordnance Survey want thousands of pounds to produce a map for us of the town, in sufficient detail that we can then overlay these other details onto it. So if we're happy with that,
No, that's the map that I was hoping that you'd have.
right,
Because
we've got a set of
graphical
those.
map.
Yep, we've got that as a basic map, and then those overlays that can be laid on top to achieve those effects. So if you're
Animation.
happy that we use those,
Yes.
we've got a lot more in place than we thought we'd got in place.
But it hasn't got, has this actually got the green, for example,
Green space.
Festival Field,
Um,
has it got the cricket pitch, has it got the, has
No.
I
it
don't
got,
think this
No.
presentation does have, I mean, obviously, within the draft neighbourhood plan, you've got
I think
various
that's so
things there.
important.
But I
The draft
absolutely
neighbourhood
agree with
plan-
Councillor Fuller that the green sites are almost as important to people in this town.
They are.
What we are either going to gain or
I
frankly
think they're the most
retain
important thing.
Yes,
as the actual development sites themselves. So we
Yeah.
desperately,
But you've got to
desperately
pay.
need those.
This is the pain.
But
Let's have the gain.
yeah,
Yeah.
there
Well,
there is a good map which shows those. I mean, I've seen the overlays and everything else. It's
Yes.
a large-scale map, you know, it'd be about that sort of size, with the overlays with green space on it, and indeed with the cycleways on
Now
it.
with the overlays on it as a
I like the green overlay on top of that as a final thing, and that's brilliant,
Yeah.
honestly.
now, green spaces, the neighbourhood plan draft that we've got contains only old green space, under green spaces category, only the old green space that's been with us for a very long time. It includes things like the churchyard, it includes the ground around the Milton Chapel, the Milton Road Chapel, and it includes the recreation ground and stuff like that. It doesn't include any of the new sites, what you're talking about, the bonuses, because those are all attached to those housing sites.
I know.
So they're all in the housing detail. What we've got to bring out in the neighbourhood plan is that those are also green space advantages.
Exactly.
That's
I mean, there
what's
are
got to be
specific-
brought out, and it's not been done yet.
Sorry, there are specific plans that relate to Benefield Road North, which shows an approximate position for the festival site and its approximate size, and indeed for the Herne Road site, where the potential new sort of cricket pitches, etc., would be. So we need those.
Artists to add things to there.
There's also, on a similar tack, on Benefield Road, on Miller's Field, there's the allotment site.
Yes,
Again, it
we
would
need
be
to
quite
put that
nice
on
to
there.
see
Yeah.
that in more detail, and in connection with the Living Land site. There's there's an included element of green space, if I can call it that, which again ought to be highlighted.
Well,
Yeah.
there's the stuff around Prince William School, there's the, as you said, there's those things, and they need to be clearly put on.
What becomes very obvious when
Those-
you do that is that there is one site which, save for cycleways, doesn't seem to offer anything,
Which is that.
which is the Ashton Road site,
Yeah.
the Persimmon site.
You see, I like to see the cycleway imagined,
Yeah.
because I still have.
There is an overlay with the cycleways on.
There
I've
is.
seen it.
Yeah.
There is one with that. There is
There
one
are-
with all
there's a
these
series
things.
of maps.
But as regards green space, the new green space is not on any of those plans. We need to do that.
Is
And-
that a cat, you said?
Yeah,
So can we get that on?
Well,
that
hopefully
That can be-
Mark
that can be
Baines has got
produced,
that,
yeah.
We think
that's what we're
Because
trying
I
to
think
say.
there should be, to be honest, I think the first map is the map of Arundel. Second map is the benefit. And then we put the houses on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get the order right.
That's exactly how we're selling it in the marketing
Yeah,
presentation.
you know,
That's exactly what we're doing. Yeah, Yeah.
with the nice stuff.
yeah. That's exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. No, brilliant. That's good news.
Yeah,
That's a
but I mean, the green space needs to be updated. I keep making this point. The green space bit of the neighbourhood plan needs to be updated, and we also need to decide what's happening about Fletton Field, because that's in there at the moment as a green space. We took it off that little summary
Yeah.
that we produced the other day and put out to you as I think a 4-page summary. We took it off of there because it's now with the green, the village green status has been turned down, so we don't know where they are with applying for development on there.
The reality is, of course, that we should include it in the neighbourhood plan as a green space,
I
because
agree.
it's still another way potentially of protecting it.
Absolutely.
If this can get adopted before they get planning permission.
That is
And once
one
it's
option.
actually gone out to
Yes.
Reg 14 consultation, it can be
Yeah.
taken into account as well by an inspector.
Absolutely.
Which is why we're trying to push on with it.
No, I agree.
And
There's lots of good reasons.
right,
So we're not held up by that. We aren't held up by it because we just put it in as green space.
Absolutely.
we can put it in and we can pursue with it, but I mean the very person who is sitting here saying let's put it in and let's go with it, let's use it as a tool, is the person who at the last meeting was saying nothing's going to happen this year. You know,
I'm
and
still concerned as to whether it will, but
well, it won't if we carry on the way we're going. So this is what's annoying me, is that we must plan our attack and we must make our attack. And if you want that in as a green space to try and preserve that space, then we need to get on, make this presentation to the town and get it done, and get these events out there during November and December. That's what's got to
That's
happen.
going to be the order.
Yeah, I was going to say, is the result of the green space, is that widely known? I mean, is it something that needs
What's
to go
it
to the
been?
article?
Yes, yeah, that's been, well, it's been, the notice has been put up, it's been on our website, it's been at this meeting.
I think there's an army of dog walkers, unfortunately. The number of dog walkers.
If I can quickly conclude the neighbourhood plan update so
Yes,
that we can
Councillor,
move on. Mark Benz is now looking to produce maps for us. He's if we're happy with that, he's prepared to produce all the maps. I put an article into the Nene Valley News
Saw it.
that just to update people, just to keep the momentum going, while we get something out there telling them what's happening next. And we need the marketing group to get together. We need the marketing group now to start marketing the neighbourhood plan and start preparing the presentation to follow on from this presentation. We can use big chunks of it, but we need to update it considerably. That's really it on the update.
It's moved a bit, well done.
If we can then move on to estates, once again, the estates minutes are in your pack. Unless there's anything specific, I would like to move on because we've got some issues to consider in closed session that we really must get to tonight. So unless there's anything on estates, I'll leave it to you to read the minutes that are in the pack. Correspondence for action, we've had nothing come in. So there's no correspondence for information either. So that moves us on to the point where we say, please note that in view of the special and/or confidential nature of the business about to be transacted, it is advisable in the public interest that the public be temporarily excluded and they are instructed to withdraw. That's our standing order 3C.
if apologies to the member of the public present, I'll second that.
Anyway.
Yeah, sorry about this. This is
Yeah.
I didn't see it then.
It's okay. Thanks for coming.
right. So we reopen the meeting with item 116. Any other relevant matters for report only. So I'll go around the room and ask councillors if they have anything else they want to raise at the meeting. Councillor Hutton.
No, nothing.
Councillor Chesser.
Two things quick.
Yeah.
That lady there was Christine Knott. She's now another flood warden, and she's also looking at becoming a councillor, which is why she was witnessing our meeting tonight. So thank you very much. Second point, just to have something in your heads, something I'm thinking about, putting bids for electric cars chargers. That's all.
Thank you. Councillor Chapel. Councillor Humphreys. No. And And I haven't got anything. So with that, I shall close the meeting at 10:09.
Brilliant.